The cop tossed my license into the dirt and smirked, like he'd just won some personal victory. He thought I was just another nobody in a hat who'd quietly take the humiliation. What he didn't know was who he'd just disrespected. Soon enough, he'd find out the hard way. It was a sunny Tuesday afternoon, the kind where even the worst traffic couldn't ruin the vibe. Michael Barnes, 56 years old, was cruising down a quiet suburban road in his trusty old pickup truck. Dusty, a little banged up, but reliable, kind of like Michael himself. His MAGA hat, worn and frayed, rested comfortably on his head. It was more habit than statement, a reminder of his roots and values, but he knew what it meant to people these days. Judgment, assumptions, trouble. As he approached a stop sign, a flash of red and blue filled his mirrors. A police car. Michael sighed and pulled over, rolling down his window as a young officer strutted up to the driver's side. Officer Chad Mitchell, 30, looked like he'd just stepped off a recruitment poster. Clean cut, sunglasses reflecting the sunlight, and an air of authority that bordered on arrogance. "Afternoon, sir. License and registration." Michael reached into his glove box, pulling out the paperwork, then handed over his license. "Any reason I'm getting stopped, officer?" Chad barely glanced at the license before his eyes locked on the hat. "You were driving a little slow. Figured I'd check things out." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Slow? That's a first." Chad smirked, holding up the license like it was an old receipt. "Michael Barnes, huh? Interesting choice of headwear, Mr. Barnes. You planning to stir up some trouble today?" Michael's jaw tightened, but he kept his tone even. "Just running errands." Chad took a step back, twirling the license between his fingers like it was a prop. "You know, folks around here don't always appreciate people making statements." "It's a hat, officer." Chad chuckled, shaking his head. "Sure it is. Sit tight." He walked back to his squad car, leaving Michael simmering in silence. Minutes passed, and Michael watched in his mirror as Chad appeared to be typing a novel into his computer. When the officer finally returned, his attitude was sharper. "Mr. Barnes, looks like you've got an expired tag here." Michael frowned. "No way. I renewed it last month." Chad shrugged, smirk growing wider. "Well, it's not showing up. Gonna have to write you up." And just like that, Chad dropped the license onto the ground. "Oops." Michael stared at the license lying in the dirt, then back at Chad. "Seriously?" Chad leaned in, sunglasses glinting. "Why don't you pick that up, Mr. Barnes? Oh, and maybe reconsider the wardrobe next time you're in my town." Michael exhaled slowly, his calm demeanor barely holding. As Chad strolled back to his squad car, Michael bent down, picked up his license, and got back into his truck. He didn't say a word, but the look in his eyes? This wasn't over. Michael spent the rest of the afternoon in quiet reflection, replaying the encounter in his head. The arrogance, the condescension, the sheer disrespect. By evening, Michael had made a call. A few calls, actually. Meanwhile, Officer Chad Mitchell was enjoying a typical shift. Speed traps, minor traffic stops, and a whole lot of feeling like the king of the road. He didn't think twice about Michael Barnes. To Chad, it had been just another stop, just another guy he could push around to boost his ego. The next morning, though, things started to shift. Chad arrived at the station to find his fellow officers whispering, casting him strange looks. One of them, Officer Daniels, approached him cautiously. "Hey, Chad, you hear anything about a new boss?" Chad frowned. "Boss? What boss?" Daniels shrugged. "Word is some bigwig from outside the department is coming in to shake things up." Chad scoffed. "Great. Just what we need. Another suit who thinks they know better." He brushed it off, convinced it was nothing to worry about. 2 days later, the precinct gathered in the conference room for an all-hands meeting. Chad leaned against the back wall, arms crossed, bored out of his mind. Captain Harris cleared his throat. "All right, listen up. We've got a new sheriff in town, literally. Everyone, meet your new chief of police." The door opened, and in walked Michael Barnes. Hatless, sharp suit, and a look that could cut glass. Chad's jaw dropped so hard, it practically hit the floor. Michael scanned the room, his eyes locking onto Chad's. He didn't smile, didn't smirk, just stared. "Morning, everyone. I look forward to working with you." His tone was calm, controlled. But underneath it, pure steel. Chad tried to shrink into the background, but Michael wasn't about to let him off that easy. As the meeting wrapped up, Michael approached Chad directly. "Officer Mitchell." Chad swallowed hard. "Yes, sir?" Michael tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "Let's talk about respect, and maybe next time you'll think twice before tossing someone's license in the dirt." Chad couldn't respond. He just stood there, sweating bullets, as Michael turned and walked away. Because now, the power dynamic had flipped completely.